All right. Ready to talk about this thing? Hopefully.
What's the average between 17 and, or 15 to 20?
17.5.
17 and a half.
Okay.
Why not just round to 18?
20 and 25 is 23 and a half, right?
22 and a half.
22, that's not an average.
I'm going crazy.
Well, that's a good answer. But it is a number between. Why not? Now, some people always ask, and I love this. It's mostly a 243 question. You guys have stopped asking. Maybe it's because you're too tired. That's okay too. But why not round it off to 18?
Yeah.
Right. If you round them all like that, that means everything's going to be a half a mile an hour faster than it should be, and you're no longer centering the law of large numbers. You're biasing the law of large numbers. Good. Very, very good. Very, very good. So just keep that in the back of your mind. It might not make a lick of difference, honestly, in a study like this, but it might make a lick of difference in a study somewhere else. All right, good. So honestly, friends, the first 5 questions of this most likely are look identical to the last one, yes? No difference whatsoever. Same average, same thing we're testing. We're still testing greater than 30. The only difference, and 6 for that matter, looks exactly the same. The only difference is in the test statistic, potentially, and the p-value. So what I want to do real quick is get caught up with you guys. I'm going to slap the numbers in here. And before we run the test explicitly, I'm just going to run the same thing I did. Ooh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm doing them side by side. Hang on. I'll put them here. 1, 3, 2, 4, 4, 0, 1. Okay. And real quick. You can't see anything I'm doing right now. I'm sorry. Change the window here real quick, friends. Good. Let's scale this bad boy to 5. Okay, so just so you know, I've done this. The bottom histogram is the COPS data. I can't turn 4 graphs on at the same time. I'd love to be able to, but yeah, like 3 at most, 3. So the bottom histogram is the COPS data. Directly above it is the COPS box plot. Directly above that is my box plot, my data, my box plot. So what I'm checking for with these 3 plots are a couple things. Number one, it's a small sample compared to my sample. But is the data still roughly in a bell shape? Roughly in a bell shape. Does it have a couple noisy, lumpy tails and then kind of a hump near the middle? It's arguably a bell, right? With a small sample size, with a small sample size, it's arguable enough. I think we can call it that. The biggest thing I'm looking for, though, is what? Biggest thing I'm looking for is any kind of an outlier. And there's even less of a chance of an outlier here than here. The box is so wide, which accounts for more variability in the middle 50%. But the range is almost identical. That's what I love about this. The range, they max out and min out at the same. So you got more variability in the middle, but less variability on the outside, which is going to obviously translate to some different summary statistics too. We'll get into that in a second. So I think we're okay. The reason I'm testing for outliers, and you might see this in Stat 352, if you have a lot of outliers and you still want to run a t-test, you can't. But there are alternatives to t-tests that you can run that don't care about outliers. And more on that later, more on that later. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to run 1-bar stats on the COPS data. Now I know you guys probably didn't do this, and that's okay. Notice, the COPS got the same average speed, essentially, that I did. I got 31.6, they got 31.16, but they're over 30, yes? They average higher than 30. The standard deviation is close. Mine was about 6 miles an hour, theirs is about 8. That hopefully should make sense. Their box was wider, that means their data was more variant. So a little bit more, but not excruciatingly more. They got a sample size of 15, not very many. They've got roughly 1/6 of the sample size I do, so there's that. So basically, the COPS got the same data I did, right? Essentially. So therefore, can we just fill out the rest of the template with the same template you guys turned in?
No.
Wait a minute. I just said we got the same data.
Their sample was a lot smaller.
And why does that matter? It's the same data! Well, fight with me, fight with me.
Margin of error.
Ah! 243 data is the same. 244, the summary data, the summary inference is totally different. The sample size is 15. That means it's 1/6 what my sample size was. That's going to have a reciprocal effect on the margin of error. Smaller sample, larger margin of error. Let's see if it's meaningful. I don't know if it is. Well, I know every term and then I forget between the 3 months. So, let's run it, yes? We now know what we're doing. We're running the exact same test. The only thing I got to do is make sure I switch to L3. At least I do. I changed it to L3. You might have just overwritten L2, which is okay as well. Good so far? You guys like drawing? I do too. Okay, we're looking for area over here. That's your p-value. Oh! That's right, it is huge. I always forget every term how big that is. Okay, so I think we just saw, I always forget how much I love this data set. We just saw the difference in the ruler with sample size. This numerically is the same distance as it was in ours before. It's about 1.5 miles an hour. But when your sample size is tiny, that ruler shrinks. When your sample size goes up, it increases because this is within the margin of, that tells us it's within the margin of error. Look, your test statistic is 0.57. That's really close to 0, yes? So that's number 7. Number 8, your p-value is huge comparing it to the 5%. Yes. So would the cops conclusion be it appears they're speeding?
Nope.
No, the cop's conclusion would be it does not appear they're speeding. Because that tells you they're not speeding by the definition of greater than 30. I'm going to get that question in a second, but you got a question for me. I can feel it. Can we make an error? Of course. What type?
That was my question.
Oh, good! So, now we're doing this for turning, yes? So we just said it does not appear that they're speeding. What type of error could we make? Connor?
Well, doesn't it say that they are speeding, but it's just not significant?
But to me that means not speeding. Yes, what Connor said is the sample is going above 30 on average.
Yeah.
But assuming that's 243. So 243, both these samples look identical to me. But 244 says, as a representation of the population, we're saying the population's not speeding. Whereas my data says the population is speeding. And this goes back to my point, with a large enough sample, you can make any difference statistically significant. Is that fair?
Yeah.
The cops just didn't get a large enough sample to show it. And the cops can also counter going, hey, geek, 2 miles an hour over is nothing to worry about. That's okay, but that's not statistics. That's anecdote. So, it does not appear they're speeding, statistically significantly speeding. Fair? Could we be wrong? Of course. How could we be wrong? This is a type 2 why?
Because you're saying that they're not, but they still could be.
You're saying they're not, but they might actually still be. That's a false,
Negative.
thank you, that's a false negative test result. Thank you, friends. That's a false negative. Chris, make sense? Good? Decent, decent. I love this. I love having these two data sets next to. I didn't have the cops data set for a long time. I only had mine. And then one day I finally realized, and I'm questioning having them. I know they are years apart. Like I measured mine about 10 years ago and the cops data came a couple years after. So there might have been a change in behavior. But I mean, the sample doesn't show it. The sample shows almost the exact same average. So funny. I never hear about people that go down Archie Briggs slowly. I always hear about the ones that get caught. Oh, I got a ticket on Archie Briggs again. As a biker, I'm glad you get a ticket on Archie Briggs. I mean, I've gotten into so many verbal altercations with cars, especially this time of year. Idiot, what are you riding your bike in the snow for? I'm like, idiot, why are you driving a 2-ton truck and yelling at a biker in the snow for? I mean, you got an empty 3/4 ton Chevy and you're fishtailing around me. Who's the idiot? But I'm glad their speed limits are enforced. I mean, honestly, because I'm the one that's out there on a bike, open, sliding sometimes. Chris, go!
Those little trailers they put up that have the speed sign.
Oh, the blinkies. I love
Do
those.
those keep data?
I don't know, and they haven't returned my. I want the data from that one. I want pre and post data in particular from that one. Those things are great on so many levels. Years ago, related story. Have you ever noticed they make soda machines now that are dormant until you walk by them? I'm sure you've noticed this. So one of the basement of Pioneer. The first one I noticed was in the basement of Pioneer. I go down in the morning for Pioneer to walk to Mazama to take a shower, and I walk by the soda machine in the basement of Pioneer Hall. And as I walked by, it came to life. The lights popped up. They made a whirring sound. And I was like, that is freaking genius. Number one, it's saving power by being off. The lights, anyway. Number two, it got my attention when I walked by. Genius on 2 levels.
Good morning, Sean.
Good morning, Sean. Buy a Pepsi. Those signs also, I think, are genius for maybe even more reasons. Number one, they are showing you from a great distance, especially at night, where it's most important, I would imagine, like as you go through Tumalo, what your speed is. From pretty far away, I think a quarter mile or so, right? If you're going, I think, more than 5 or 10 over the speed limit, it flashes the light at you. And it doesn't stop flashing until you come down to within whatever that margin is. It's genius. I would love to see the pre-post data on the speeds of the cars going through. I would love to see it, because I can't get it without collecting it myself, and I got a 7-year-old on the time. Should make it 244 project. Take away a project and replace it with that. What's that?
They won't give it to you?
I did some stat work for the Ben PD a while ago, since collecting this data from him, and ever since then, Captain Porter just won't return my emails. I don't know why. It was damn good data. It was a great data analysis. I mean, his lieutenants loved it, but he hated it. I don't think I gave him what he wanted.
You should be able to get that. That should be public information.
It should be. I don't know where it is, though. That's what I'm asking. I'm like, is this somewhere? Can I have it?
Stop talking to him, talk to somebody else.
Well, yeah, probably. Yeah. I would love to see. My gut is that it's working like a charm. That's my gut. And some of you are nodding as well. Anecdotally, I think it's, I mean, how can it not, right? Who's going to ignore a blinking speed limit sign going, you're going too fast? So, I love that though. It's so good. Wish I had a better answer for you, Chris. Unfortunately, I don't. Cool? Before we leave, let's make a pile of those up here. Yes. I do want to, I want to start one. Yeah, let's pan them up now. Let's look at them now. That's good.
Just the top one?
Just the last one. Just the cop one. You guys keep the other one. That way you have a reference for that one. Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you, guys.
I do actually have a quick question.
Yeah, Ryan, what's up?
So when you're writing this, I always forget, like, do you write that it's greater than?
You can put equal.
You can just put equal?
If you want to put greater than 5%.
Oh.
Because that's what we're comparing it to, right? Ryan asked a very, very good question. May I give you credit for it? So Ryan asked a question about the p-value, number 8. He's like, if I want to put an inequality sign greater than, just put greater than 5%. Because it is. Really what you're doing is what Elizabeth told us to do, comparing it to 5%. If it's greater than 5%, that means you're going to put it does not appear anything's changed. If it's less than 5%, it appears something's changed. So you can either put it equals this p-value, or it's greater than 5%, or less than it, whatever the case may be. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And you've got a question on your last exam that analyzes why it's greater than sometimes and not just equal to. I have a video I've made to kind of talk you through it, and then I kind of a circle of the correct responses kind of thing that even drives that point. It's the last thing I want you to look at in this class is, once again, what a p-value is, because it really is that important. And that's really, besides making a confidence interval, knowing what a p-value implies is probably the most important part of this class. The tests are great, but they're just vehicles for getting us a p-value. Fair? Is that good? Please, Trace. No, oh, I thought you had a question.
No.
Okay. Fair? Now let's set the stage for the next bit. Because I love these. I love these. The problem with these, and the problem with the single proportion z-tests, like the ones you guys did for last week, some of you already resubmit them, was that all of them had a bit of fiction worked up in them. And here's what I mean by that. In this test, your null hypothesis included what number? And your research hypothesis included what number? 30. 30, which was a number gotten to us contextually because we're checking whether cars are speeding or not. Okay. If you think back to yesterday's class, I asked you to measure 2 distances on a piece of paper. Those numbers, 3 inches and 7 inches, were in the null hypothesis and the research hypothesis. If you go back even further to last week, we tested against a loss of appetite rate on a competing medication. I forget what the number is right now. We also tested against a flu rate of 12%. We also tested against a Florida motorcycle death rate of something. If you did the quizzes, you tested against the national AP pass rate of some percentage. You tested a New York Times 75%. All these numbers, right? However, what to do if you don't have a number? What if you can't extract that number? Here's the next step. Let me paint the picture. Let me give you context of why I'm asking this question, because as I always try to think of contextual problems to do in class, because they're the most fun, I think, ones that actually become part of your life. So here's what I'm talking about. How many of you remember this? We're going back about, let me check, about 2 years now. Remember this? Maybe you don't. You might not. You do. Chris remembers it. How many of you have ever wondered why the hell TV commercials are so loud? You ever wondered?
Attention.
To get your attention, yes. Because when you walk out of the that's when you walk out of the room to go get something to eat. You want to make sure they're yelling at you from the kitchen. You can still hear them. So apparently Congress has nothing else to do. So they decided to push the FCC to making a rule that said TV commercials cannot be louder than a TV show. That was the first thing I asked, of course.
What's loud?
What's loud? That's the first thing I ask, because I'm a smart ass. I have to ask, okay, how the hell are you going to make that call? So go ahead and read the article with me, if you would. Well, good, thank you. Different TV shows are very, very different. Me and Max, for the first time, watched The Princess Bride on Saturday night. It's phenomenal. After playing in the snow all day and then watching The Princess Bride, what a magical day that was. And that movie very rarely gets very loud, right? But then, some of his other favorite movies, they have cartoon characters yelling at each other. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a headache. So then what does loud mean? If you have all these different volumes, I mean, think about different shows you might watch. Maybe you watch one of those nature specials. Yes, here's the three-toed sloth rolling up the tree. Oh, look, he's eating a banana. I mean, you know, that thing never gets above like 12 dB. And then you watch a show on like, okay, we're gonna try the 12 game. Like, what is loud? What is loud? What do you guys think?
120.
120 decibels is friggin' loud. I remember somebody brought a decibel meter to my one of the Hands on Throat shows that we played. They said, my God, you guys are louder than Motley Crue. I've worn that as a badge of honor ever since. Louder than Motley Crue. Yes! So what is, let's come back to that if you don't mind. 120 decibels, I believe, is a plane taking off. Please tell me you don't have your TVs that loud in your... I believe that's what 120 decibels is. It's ludicrously loud. And decibels are tricky. Decibels, deci means 10. Every increase in decibel is 10 times more intense than the one before it. So when you go from like 108 to 120, I'm like, oh, it's 12 decibels. I'm like, yeah, that's 10 to the 12th more intense. So you have to realize that there's some multiplicative you go. It's like pH. A 1 on the pH scale is 10 times more acidic or basic, depending on which direction you're going. It's kind of crazy to think about that. So anyway, long-awaited. It was long-awaited. I know it was, because I actually got some data from years ago to play with in class. TV commercials cannot be louder than... TV commercials cannot be louder than the TV show that someone is watching. Okay. That tells us something, doesn't it? That gives us a reference. Now we don't have to worry about whether we're watching a three-toed sloth eating banana or an explosion of a landmine at 120 dB. The commercial following it can't be any louder than it. This is why people have very well-paying jobs that pair commercials with the shows. Think about that. That is not random. You don't randomly see commercials. My wife watches. I don't understand it, but it's internet television now. It's Hulu and it's Netflix. I don't really understand what the hell's going on, but I keep watching Morgan Mini DVDs. But apparently now they ask you what's the phrase? Which
ad experience is best for you?
Thank you. Which ad experience would you prefer? And they give you a choice, and they give you a quick little synopsis of both, and you can pick. It's like customizing the commercial so you actually maybe watch it more. Oh, the stats are everywhere. They're getting their tendrils in. It makes me so happy. It's funny. People always, oh, it's Big Brother. I'm like, it's freaking genius. The other day, this is perfect. The other day, I fired up Internet or Firefox to open a COCC website, and over here on the right side of the page, it went blink, blink, and I looked, and it said a new ADHD medication. A, how they know it was me. B, they blinked. Whew. I'm like a moth to a flame if something's moving like that. Genius. I love this. How do they know that? Now, for a while, you know what it was like. You were in an email, and based on the text in your email, it would throw up ads that you thought they might, you know. So me and my friends started loading the emails with crazy things like Carnage, Blood, Tourniquet, just to see what will come up. But then they started getting really good. If you go to Amazon and you start searching for something in Amazon, it'll start showing up in your Gmail feed. It'll show up in your Facebook feed. It's freaking amazing. It's completely amazing, the mathematics behind all this now. Oh, yeah. That's the data I want to see.
I went to San Diego and all of a sudden all these
yes! SeaWorld!
Yeah.
Legoland!
Casino.
Casinos, yeah, sure. Because it depends on what you're talking about in San Diego. Can't wait to go to San Diego, be loaded with you. Casino. Right? The Strip. I mean, anyway, it's friggin' amazing. People are like, oh, Big Brother. I'm like, Big Brother's a genius, man. If that's Big Brother, I'm fully in favor of Big Brother. That's efficiency, right? that's less spam. Because if you get something in your email that you didn't ask for and you want to see it, it's not spam anymore, is it? Spam implies it's something you don't want to see. But if it's like, oh my God, they're having a sale on orange amplifiers, I was thinking about buying one of these. They know that, of course, because you were Googling it. Oh, sorry, I'm getting excited. That's this like, it's like this at work. So anyway, back to this. As of Thursday morning, so Christmas a couple years ago, TV viewers should no longer have to run to the TV or the remote control to turn down the volume because blasting TV commercials are trying to get the viewer's attention. A whole bunch of subjectivity in there, right? I've been playing punk rock drums for almost 30 years of my life. Blasting to me is totally different than blasting maybe to Brendan, right? My hearing's pretty good, and even for a punk rock drummer, but still, I have a high tolerance for noise. Last night we listened to Ghost in the Machine by the Police while we ate dinner, and Jen said, "Can you please turn that down?" I'm like, "Turn what down?" For her, the Police played at 45 on the volume was way too high, so I knocked it down to 40, whatever those numbers mean either. So again, blasting, turn down the volume, I mean, these are all subjective things, right? TV commercials should no longer be louder, just a better idea, that's already said twice. The FCC's ruling applies to TV stations, cable, and satellite companies. Okay, so it's always fun to see the data they collect. They actually got some data here. There we go. TV viewers can report super loud commercials to the FCC on the agency's website. But don't worry, there's actually a metric there that defines super loud. I'm totally kidding, there's not. There's no metric at all. If you think something's loud, you can call them, and then they can do something with that data. Here's the data. Have you ever been blasted by an excessively loud TV commercial in the last 6 months? Now go think back to your first project, please. Your first project, sampling project. Anything wrong with that question? Please, Elizabeth?
Blasted makes it biased. It makes you automatically not like the.
Who's gonna say no to that? Oh God, yeah. That's jarring your memory to make you think of that, right? You're now gonna think of the most obnoxious. There was one, Dee's Home Furnishings in Philadelphia back in the 80s. I'll never forget this guy. "You've never seen prices like Dee's!" And that's literally how he delivered the commercial, yelling at you, right? Whenever I see this, I think of Rick Dees, I think his name. I could be getting that mixed up with the DJ.
He's a DJ.
He was a DJ. I'm getting it mixed
Yeah,
up with
he
him
did
then.
it
It wasn't him. It was Dees was the same last name. So, yes, make it stop! No, the law seems to be working. I mean, seriously? Who's gonna pick the second one? Or, if you would pick the second one, who's gonna click, right? Are you gonna vote for something? This goes back to my whole negative bias of emailing. When do I hear from students about Blackboard?
Well, they're having a problem.
When something's going wrong. Nobody's ever sent me an email that says, "You know what, dude, everything's great today. Totally awesome, Blackboard's working so well." And I don't expect those from you guys, right? So who's gonna vote on these most likely? The ones that are unhappy with it. This doesn't surprise me at all, right? I have no idea what the actual numbers say because I'm getting a biased sample most likely. Not to mention the fact that you have to go to the website to do it, which means you already have to be Googling the result, "I think commercials are too loud," which is going to take you to that portal. Anybody that thinks, "You know what, commercials are really cool, let's go check that out." Who the hell's going to do that? Nobody's going to do that, right? You're going to be pissed already and then further biased by the question. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Good. Lawmakers ask FCC to report. Okay, this is what I got excited. I can report. I'm excited now. I'm excited. 2 leading members of Congress have asked the federal FCC to report on whether broadcasters have been complying with last year's law. Okay? The 2 sponsors of the Commercial Advertisement Loudness Mitigation, CALM, asked for an update on the law's effectiveness. Now, I can't find their data. But what I did find, and we'll stop with this today. Go to your data sheet. We'll start with this one next time. Take a look. Page 2. Now this is older data than 2012. This is back around 2009, 2010, somewhere in there. All I remember, it was done by a school in Texas. That's all I remember, unfortunately. It was done at a time when there actually were a lot of commercials accompanying TV. And this was back when it was like, you could actually throw an antenna up in the air and get TV. I guess you can still do that now with a digital antenna. So, what this very clever school did was, they tested this hypothesis before it was even a hypothesis. They took a show, they measured it, they randomly selected these shows, not very many, and they analyzed the peak decibels They had the volume set, it's all been normalized, it was all normalized. They had the volume set at whatever level it was set at. And as long as you stay consistent, it doesn't matter what that volume is, if it's very loud or very soft. So they set it at a certain listening level. It had a dB meter on. And they measured the show's peak decibel reading. Peak decibel reading, okay? So the highest it got decibel-wise. So if you jokingly said 120, 71, 69, 72, 74, nowhere near. Probably what I'm talking right now to you guys is probably around, hang on. I'm curious.
I think conversation's usually around 50 decibels.
Is that at 50? I'm gonna check my tester right now. I got some decibel meters in here.
You're a bit loud though.
I am a bit loud. That's true. So if I'm talking normally, hang on, put that, I'm gonna put it where you are.
Okay.
I'm talking normally right now. What are we coming in? We got an average up there, maybe somewhere in there. Yeah, something. What are you coming in at?
It's going pretty high.
Let's go. Surprise! What was it, ish? 80?
Yeah, it's
Somewhere in the 80s?
right.
Okay, so somewhere in the 80s. So the show's a little quieter than me, thank God, right? Thank God. Probably the different tenor, too. And then what they did, they got the exact same meter running. And that meter that I just had Brian look at has an average and a peak needle. And I've downloaded like 6 or 7 of them, and they all give close results. I've often thought about having them in class with you guys, but I gotta work that project out. Anyway, the peak show decibels and the peak commercial decibels immediately following. Because, you know, you've got basically like a 5 or 6 minute segment followed by a minute and a half commercials. 5 or 6 minute segment followed by a minute and a half, 2 minutes of commercials. So what they did was they took a segment of show followed by a segment of commercial and analyzed the peak decibel reading in each. Is that fair? So they want to compare. So you guys take a quick look at the data. Does it look like the commercials are louder than the shows? So Tyler's saying no. Erica's saying not really.
More often than not.
More often than not.
Yeah.
Karen, now, not so much. Trace, now, not so much. So good. So here's something I want you to think about. If we were to run this like a t-test, what would you put in your null hypothesis? What number would go, this is a trick question, FYI. What number would go in your null hypothesis? Knowing it's a trick question might help you answer this. Would you put in, say, 72?
You'd average it.
You'd average it, throw the average in. I like that answer. I like that answer. That isn't what's usually done, Trace, but I like that answer a lot. I like that answer a lot. What would you do with the commercial shows then?
The same.
Okay, can anybody think of a potential issue? So Tracy's got a very good idea. Average the shows, and then average the commercials. That's 2 numbers now. Shit. It's 2 different numbers, isn't it? Probably 2 different numbers, I'm guessing. What do you do with those? We could average those, I guess, too. We could average those, too, but now we've averaged everything down to 1 number. We've kind of lost some stuff, haven't we?
Yeah.
Poop. Okay? That's not a bad idea. Come on, let's say it's a bad idea. You could average the show decibel levels. And here's one thing we could do. We could average the show decibel levels and make a confidence interval around that, couldn't we? And then we could average the commercials decibel levels and make a confidence interval around that, and then see if what?
How they compare.
If it's really loud.
Yeah, Chris.
Well, no, I was just, so the decibel, is this just how length of time the sound is being made?
It's simply the largest, so when you look at a decibel meter, it's got a little needle or a digital readout. The peak is the highest that sound intensity goes. So essentially it's a continuum of time, and then it's every once in a while you'll get these like little red light peaks.
But if a commercial is 30 seconds and they scream for 2 seconds,
That would be the peak.
that would be.
That would be the peak. That's what this study measured was the peak,
Okay, gotcha.
not the average. We'll come
Okay,
back to that
gotcha.
too. Good for you, sir. Good. And I haven't been able to find a study that does on the average, and if I had more time, I'd do it myself. I just don't.
Well, peak makes more sense anyway.
It kind of does for the obnoxious level, right? I mean,
Otherwise-
although you could argue both. You could argue that I can deal with 2 seconds of peak if I don't have to deal with 28 seconds of like obnoxiously above average. So we can argue it both ways. All I'm trying to do is I'm trying to figure out anybody louder, right? I want to know what louder, turn the volume down. I want to know how they're metricing that. Yes, Brian? Go.
Well, it's dynamic range that is giving you like what's loud and what's not. You could have the same.
20 dB could seem very loud, couldn't it? Yeah, 20 dB could be very loud or not loud at all. It all depends on, you're actually answering the question I was asking about 5 seconds ago. So the trick answer to my trick question is, you wouldn't put any of these numbers in the null hypothesis. Do you have an idea what number we would put in the null hypothesis? You're going to put a number in, just none of these.
The volume you added?
Not even that. It's even pull it back from there. It's a number we've written on the board today. We haven't talked much about, although back on the curve that's up here, the number is up here. Not 30, 0. You put in 0 for your null, because the null hypothesis is that the commercials are not louder than the shows themselves, which means there's 0 difference. And then we allow the data to show us if there actually is one deviation from 0. We have to normalize, like we do with everything. We're going to use that 0. And the reason I like these so much more than the other kinds of tests is it doesn't require any fixed starting value. We bypass this axis and go straight to this one. From here on out, we're going to bypass the practical contextual and go straight to the statistical. That doesn't mean we should lose the practical contextual. It means we can go straight to the statistical analysis that we're going to do anyway. But more on that, we can't do that in 4 minutes. Let's do that next time, shall we? So we'll do 2 of these. These are called matched pair hypothesis tests. We'll do 2 of these in class. One involves this data, and one involves some stopwatches that we'll bring back next time. We'll play with those next time. So remember, for next time, between now and then, if you turned a quiz in last week, just make sure you email me your original work so I can give you credit for it. I hate giving people 0, especially for something silly like Blackboard. So send me your original work so I can give you credit. If you have it here now, you can give it to me now. That's fine too. That's awesome. I'm gonna bring it on up. I'll add it to my pile. I'll grade it this afternoon before I send progress reports out. If you don't get it to me before 3 o'clock this afternoon, you'll just get a progress report that has 0s in it. That's okay, because we can fix it. Because we can fix it, but I want to make sure that eventually, before the end of the term, I give you the credit you deserve.